Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in with us at Hearing Her Voice. My name is Scarlett and I'm the founder of Women's March San Diego at UCSD. Today I wanted to talk about Latinas in medicine, how we still face sexual discrimination and sometimes lack of support from our own community. I have brought in Jinho as my co-host to talk about this topic with me. We had the opportunity to talk with Dr. Natalie Rodriguez, who is the Associate Clinical Professor of Department of Family Medicine and Public Health at UCSD. She is also an Associate Director of UCSD Student Run Free Clinic Project. She is passionate about increasing diversity in medicine by helping aspiring and current medical students whom are underrepresented in medicine or from disadvantaged backgrounds. It is also our first in-person interview for our podcast. We had a great time talking with her, and we hope you enjoy it as well. So we know that you come from a Hispanic background. You are first gen, second generation? You are first gen?
I mean, I guess it depends. How do you define first generation?
Like,
I was born here. I'm the first generation of my family to be born here.
Okay.
Some people call that first generation, some people call that second generation.
Okay.
It's a fine
Did your
line.
parents go to college, I guess?
No, my parents
Okay,
did
first
not
gen.
go
Okay, first gen it is.
First gen.
My parents did not go to college. My parents actually got really, I think, lucky. They grew up in the mid 70s and the computer was just taking off. And so they went to a vocational school and learned some computer skills. And my dad became a programmer. My mom did different things with computers, but they both had like what I would consider pretty successful careers considering they didn't go to college at all. And they got married really young. They were high school sweethearts. They got married right out of high school, had me a year later. And so they were babies.
So being the first one to go to college from, were they supportive? What made you go into that direction? I know that at least personally, me as a Latina growing up in El Barrio, there was a lot of people that would be like, oh, just go to, community college, or how about you just go to work instead, start making money, help out the family, you're just going to be in debt anyways. So how did you kind of were like, no, this is what I'm going to do because I want to do this?
So I feel so fortunate that my family was always really encouraging of me. I was a pretty geeky kid. I really liked school and I loved reading, and my family really encouraged that in me. And I would say the other piece where I think there's some luck, and I think it's really important to talk about this because I think I feel really passionately about breaking down beliefs that, if you just work hard, or like I pulled myself by my bootstraps, you can too, kind of thinking that's just not always true. And so the other luck piece is that my family happened to live in a neighborhood with really good schools. And I did not go to those schools for most of my life. I actually attended a very small private school. It was mostly for Black and brown kids who lived in Inglewood and Compton and areas like that. And so those were the kids that I grew up with. The same 17 kids. We were together.
Oh, it's a really small school.
Very small school. Same 17 kids in my class my whole life. God. Unfortunately, the summer before I started 8th grade, my grandfather died. And he's the one who took me to school because my parents worked. And when he passed away, there was no one else to take my sister and I to school because it was a little bit farther away from where we lived. And so very quickly, we transitioned to public school in our neighborhood. And those schools happened to be amazing. And I got to public school, 8th grade, It was a huge culture shift for me because all of a sudden I went from being with a bunch of kids who looked just like me and were like my brothers and sisters. We had grown up together, to being in this huge public school where it was predominantly white and Asian. It was super like surfer culture, which I knew nothing about at the time. And that was really rough. What was interesting though was that for the first time in my whole life, I was academically challenged. And so I was like, oh wow, like school can be hard and interesting. And it really just opened me up to new opportunities that I hadn't had at my old school. That being said, if you went with the flow at my school, you would kind of end up in college. And so all of my friends, like if I didn't have a lot of guidance. I didn't have a lot of input from my family. I didn't really know what I was doing when I applied to college. I applied to 3 schools, UCLA, Irvine, and San Diego. And the reason I wanted to come to San Diego is because I'd been here for band camp and I'd absolutely fallen in love with the campus. But the truth is I would have fallen in love wherever I went because it was that like independence and camaraderie and camp-like feel. Yeah, so I literally applied to 3 schools. I just kind of like looked around, what were my friends doing? Oh, you applied to the UCs. Oh, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And I ended up here at UCSD, and my family was incredibly supportive all along the way. My parents, my mom was working nights at the time, and she, you know, the way that we remember that time, it's like my mom, as challenging as it was for her to work nights, as disruptive as that was for our family, she's like, yeah, but we got to help you pay for school because of that work that I did. So that was pretty great. And I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a doctor. I was one of those like precocious 5-year-olds. Like,
I'm gonna be a doctor.
That's my doctor kid, and I just never let it go.
Wow.
You know, so many kids have like a little, like a book where your parents write down memories, and every year it's like, what do you want to be? Doctor. And what about next year? Doctor. So I think my parents knew that it was something that I wasn't going to let go of, and they were just so incredibly encouraging along the way. That being said, UCSD kind of kicked my butt, especially at the beginning. And I realized very quickly that I was way better at my non-science classes than I was in my science classes. And I remember calling my parents and I was like, I think I want to switch my major.
Was it OChem?
I was a biochem cell bio major.
Oh my God, same major.
And I think it was physics actually that was really pushing me over the edge. And I told my parents, I want to be a lit major. Like I'm getting all A's in my lit. I was a lit minor. And they were like, we're not sacrificing.
She's like, I am not working nights for you to just throw it off the boat right now. No, you're gonna do it right now.
You come home, you live at home, you can go to Long Beach or Dominican Hills, or you can study lit here.
She's like, but let me know so I know to put in, on my schedule, make it.
And so it's like, okay, I'll stick it out. And that's so what I did. I needed, I don't know that everyone responds to tough love in the same way, but I think I needed that in that moment. I needed a little tough love to push through those beginning classes that are, just so not at all like what the major is, and definitely nowhere near like what you're learning in medical school or things like that. So a little bit of my journey up to college.
I like how you said that once you transitioned that you were kind of challenged in a way. And it's interesting because I felt the same way, but transitioning to college, I was like, oh, I was doing very good. I was a good student in high school. And then I'm like, whoa, different ball game.
It is a different
different. And then I got like my first bad grade and I was like, I don't know what to do. I also called my mom. I was like, maybe I should go back. She's like, no, you worked hard. You should definitely keep going. What is it, like 2 more years and then you'll be done. I was like, okay. Yeah. So that tough love sometimes is needed a bit.
I mean, like, I feel the pressure just because, like, I came here for the US for college. So, and college, being an international student, pays a huge amount of tuition. So I was like, I'm not sure if I'm fit here. Like, San Diego, the weather is nice, but like, I'm not really bonding here. And my parents were like, that's a good question, but the money and the time you're spending, like, no pressure. They always say like, no pressure, but like, as you said, it was like a nice tough love to like toughen myself, because like I feel like sometimes life is hard and then you just have to accept it that life is hard. Like you cannot always go to the easy path to get where you want. So like sometimes that tough love really helps.
Absolutely. And I think, so many, not just in medicine, but in so many fields, careers, it's a long journey, and you can't possibly imagine that it's going to be easy or straight the whole way. There are definitely going to be challenges, some of them internal, some of them external, things that are out of your control. And I think learning to navigate those challenges is really important and builds resilience along the way, and I think really in some ways connects you to other people's stories as well.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like people don't always relate to the person who's lived the charmed life.
It's always the hard life
struggle,
yeah.
Right? Like that's where people really connect.
Talking about struggle, since this is like, the women's podcast, did you ever face any scrutiny or anything because you were a woman that you were trying to, go into medical school? And sometimes some people would be like, oh, how about nurse instead? Especially since, you're Latina, they're like, maybe a nursing school would look best, I know I've heard it before that people are like, oh, you're studying. Oh, so when are you going to be the nurse of like the house or whatnot, And I'm like, oh, that wasn't the direction that I'm going. But, have you ever had that happen to you before?
Definitely. And I think it started because I didn't do as well in the beginning of college. And I think we're breaking down some of these old myths, but back then it really was like, oh, you don't have a 4.0, you're never going to get in. And so you're going to need to consider some alternatives. And so that was kind of that first seed that got planted of like, well, we don't think you're going to get there. So what else could you be? What's your plan B? And that never felt very honoring, especially to the people who choose nursing as their plan A. And it wasn't, it was something that I did consider. I considered pursuing nursing. I considered being a physical therapist. My best friend from high school was a physical therapist. And I thought, oh, well, maybe, that's something that could be interesting, but it didn't quite feel like a fit for me. And then I spent some time doing research and really tried that on because I had started research as an undergrad and then continued after I graduated full time. And again, it was interesting. It was like academically stimulating, but it wasn't like feeding my soul in the way that I wanted my career to, in the same way that I felt like caring for people would. So I think that was really the first layer. And then, I mean, I can't tell you how many times people are like, oh, they will ask, you'll say like, I'm a doctor. And then literally 1 second later, they're like, oh, so you're a nurse?
Oh.
No, I'm a doctor.
Oh.
So, and I am not someone who I don't need to be called doctor. I prefer not to be called doctor. I introduce myself to people by my first name. But the only time I throw around doctor is when people come at me like that.
Excuse me. You don't know how many sleepless nights it took me to get there.
So, and then, it's really interesting where I trained in my residency program. There was a lot of doctors from Latino backgrounds, Hispanic backgrounds, different countries even. And so I never felt out of place as a Latina, but there was also, interestingly, a lot of sexism there, where it was a lot of older men, again, because they were from other countries and more patriarchal cultures. There was a lot of sexism in the hospital, and I was called mujercita in the operating room many times. Many times. I was like, no, doctora. So that definitely was an interesting twist, where you think at that point, when you've gotten that far, you're like, wearing the title, that you would be treated with respect. And that was definitely kind of a hard pill to swallow. But at the same time, so thankful that there wasn't racism and other types of microaggressions that many people of color face, even, in their institutions.
I guess like with all the aggression or like microaggression you said was happening, like there must be something like a drive for you to, keep pursuing why you pursued that residency or why that position. So maybe you can expand more on like what made you to decide to go that path of maybe through free clinic or more serving the community.
Yeah. So I knew coming into medical school that I was interested in working with underserved populations. I had spent some time working in some underserved areas in San Diego before medical school, and had kind of a deep commitment to social justice and health equity and things like that. But I didn't know exactly what that was going to look like. And then free clinic was just, I could say that it was life-saving. It was a life-saving, career-saving experience for me, because UCSD Medical School was not a diverse place back then. And it wasn't as supportive of a medical school as it could have been, as it is now. And so it's really challenging. As med school is always hard. It's always going to be hard. But those, like the lack of support and the lack of a lot of other students who looked like me, or maybe were first generation, and things like that, that was really hard. And so free clinic was a place where every week I got to go and I got to spend time with people who felt like family, doctors who were doing the kind of work I wanted to be doing, patients who reminded me of like grandma, and just that sense of family and camaraderie and support and community that I really needed. And so as much as free clinic became the place where I could see myself, like, oh, these doctors, they're doing what I want to do, like, and I then had like a model for what I wanted to do. I didn't even know that it was possible. Like, it was this dream that was kind of elusive. And then I got to see it in action. Like, oh, look at these doctors who are very successful and they're working in the community and with the community and serving. And so that was amazing to get to see that. But also it really nourished my soul and gave me the support and encouragement that I really needed, because I don't know that I would have made it through the challenges in med school without that. So you can imagine, it was such a personal experience for me that when I graduated, I 100% knew that I wanted to come back and work at Free Clinic. And that is exactly what I said to Dr. Beck, who's the founding director of the Free Clinic. I said, I'll be back in 3 years. Save me a job. And so lucky that she did. And that I got to come back and work. And then I don't even know that I've had it all flushed out at that point, like what it would mean to work with students, what it would mean to work with pre-med students and encourage people along the way. It was really more about like finding that sense of home at work and family at work. And then as I started to do it, then I realized like, oh, but it's the giving back. Like now I get to be that person that supports and encourages and cheers others on.
Oh, wow. It's like always so magical to hear all these timing and moments happening at the right time, because like it was pre-clinic was just starting, you were just joining as a medical student, and then all these positions opening up, and then it was like a vibrant community as is now. Like I think one of the tenets is like community as a teacher. So you're like learning from them also, but you're like, I learned all this much. I should be really giving back to them, which is to the pre-meds like me, volunteers or like translators or the patients.
Yeah. So it is a very, I think it's a very special thing to get to be a part of. And I think, sometimes people hear Free Clinic and, oh, do you provide like just urgent care, or is it like a drop-in thing? I'm like, no, it's not at all. I still take care of people that I met when I was a first-year medical student, and that's like so special how many people get to say that about their patients. But also just the culture that we're creating together at Free Clinic, everyone working together towards a common cause. I just think it's such a special thing to get to be a part of. So I feel lucky to go to work every single day.
So I wanted to pin back on what you said, that you in Free Clinic, you see yourself and in the community, and then because you wanted some feeling of your abuelita there too. And we were talking about patients having, it's important to have self-reflection where a patient sees themselves also in you. And I think that in Free Clinic, when there is the translator, because I'm also a translator for Monday's Free Clinic, it's nice because we are able to know what they're trying to say. So they also feel comfortable saying more things. So I feel like, being a physician where they can see themselves in you is also important, and it helps them be more comfortable. Having that said, UCSD is becoming more diverse and is helping more students come in. So what are the ways? Obviously, we're not all the way there yet. We still have like little pushes here and there. What do you think that we could do to help, or something to help those first generation have that tough love to push it out and be able to fulfill their dream, like that you were at 5 years old, you knew you were going to be a doctor. No worries. Myself at 5, I thought I was a doctor too. And my friend who was next to me, he's like, yeah, my head hurts. I'm like, don't worry, I have Motrin. Here you go. And then after that, everyone was like, oh yeah, where's Dr. Scarlett? It was like, oh no, my mom came because my mom was a nurse. So she's like, working also night shifts. So she's like, Scarlett, what did you do? And I'm like, I didn't do anything. So I completely understand. But yeah, going back to the question, sorry.
I think it's a great question, and it's certainly something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, because there's nothing wrong with having a windy path and making mistakes and learning from your mistakes along the way. But but I do think there are some lessons that you can take from the generation before you that you don't have to learn the hard way for yourself. And so that's always how I'm thinking about things. And even going back to my own story, right? And my parents saying, like, no, we didn't send you to UCSD to be a lit major. Well, shoot, if I had been a lit major, my GPA would have been a whole heck of a lot better. It would have been a lot easier to get into medical school, right?
Yeah.
And so while I appreciate their tough love, that's not always the advice that I would give people. But I do think, there's just certain things that I think can set someone up for success, and finding mentors is, I think, the number one piece of advice I would give anyone in any career with any goal. And I think sometimes when we think of mentor, we think of someone who is like way ahead of us, like the other end of their career, and there is something to be said for that. But I think those near peer relationships are so important too, because it's like, okay, well, what's my next step? Right? Which professor should I take for any given class? Hey, what do you think about my personal statement? And those things, I think, those near peer relationships. So sometimes like breaking down what it means to have a mentor, to be a mentor, is, I think, really important, because I think sometimes we think that it's one person who can like look back on their life and advise you in every part of your life. And I think the reality is that there are mentors like all along the way, and then people who are close to you, and you have professional mentors, and then there's people who might be a personal or spiritual mentor, and so breaking that down and helping people identify who those people are in their lives, I think, is really, really helpful. So, and I think that is also really inspiring as you're going along in the journey, because you can just turn around and extend your arm, right, to the person who's coming right behind you and say, hey, these are the lessons I've learned. Like, let's do this together. You don't have to reinvent the wheel or struggle in ways that I had to.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree. And that's one of also the reasons that I also, along with Amy, did the organization of Latin Health Connections, where, the undergrads help the medical students learn Spanish. And even if they don't know, they can, teach them, or even have a conversation that can feel more comfortable. But in a way, it kind of gives these undergrads access to the med students. And that way they can, be like, hey, by the way, what did you think? Do you have time to read my personal statement? What did you do? Do you have any tips for me? And I think that that's important, because, as a first gen, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know like what an MCAT was. I didn't know research was also like crucial sometimes to know what path, if we did want to go this way or that way, do a PhD, MD program. So I think that, that's a good way to do it as well. And then in turn, we can also reach that, bridge that gap between the patients, and since we have a high population of Hispanics here in San Diego, that way we can provide more better healthcare as well.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things I love most about Free Clinic is that there is so many of those near peer relationships. I love seeing them in action. I love seeing medical students cheering on our volunteers, celebrating their victories when they get into medical school or they get into a post-bac program. And then acknowledging too that because we do serve a predominantly Spanish-speaking population, we have this beautiful army of interpreters. And so many of our interpreters are first generation. And so even like those relationships that are being formed at clinic where medical students are encouraging and advising, and the opportunities that are available to some of these students to have an incredibly meaningful clinical experience that then is going to help catapult them towards their career goals is really cool. And exactly what you said, which is that we know that like when we provide language concordant care and culturally sensitive care, like even if our medical students may not be Spanish speaking or from a Latinx background, that we have those interpreters there that our patients do. They feel more comfortable. They're more willing to share their lives with us. And sometimes life means opening up about needs that they have that they might not feel comfortable sharing otherwise, concerns that they have. But they also, right, like going back to the community as teacher, they have so much to teach us about life and resilience and adversity. And so I'm so thankful. I'm thankful for our volunteers every day, and so thankful for our patients who teach us so much.
Like as a like an Asian, not even Asian American, like as Asian, like straight up Asian, like I figured out that like California is a place I need to learn Spanish. So I've been taking Spanish courses, and then when I see patients to pick up their medications or like greet them to see if they have an appointment, I would like use my broken Spanish, like usted tiene cita. I don't know if that's correct, but like that, and they will like smile up because there is this like completely Asian guy talking in Spanish, and I'll be like listening hard, like okay, I think that means dentist or dentista. I'm like okay. So like just like community will also learn me that there is like I don't have to be a fully like Latin from a Latinx culture, but if I'm like just show them effort to to learn about these communities, it will like really open their hearts up, like oh, this is a person who cares about my culture.
We recently through Latin Health Connections raised money and bought a bunch of masks for UFW, the farm workers, and like a lot of hand sanitizers, and we went and they set us up. We met them at this like gas station, but there was these people that were like doing tacos on the spot, and they even looked at him, they're like, wait, you eat tacos? And then they just lit up, they're like, yeah,
I love tacos. I'm from San Diego.
So it was a very nice bonding time as well, because we got to talk to them and it was a nice time. And then he had horchata and he knew what it was, so it was really nice.
I was like asking like, what kind of meat is that? That's not carne asada, I think.
I love it. That's awesome.
Quick question. So what words of encouragement for future Latinas would you give who are seeking to become a doctor, or who are already in med school and going into residency or finishing up residency?
You've got this. Don't let anyone tell you can't do it. You can absolutely do it, and you're doing it. Not even future tense, present tense. You are doing it. And also, my encouragement is always to like find your cheerleaders and keep them close, because they're the people who are going to remind you after a hard day, yep, this is why you wanted to do this. And you knew there were going to be hard days, and okay, today is one of them, but it's okay because tomorrow will be better. I don't know, I just think I'm so thankful for all of the cheerleaders in my life who picked me up on the days that I fell down and reminded me why I wanted to do this. And also like, we need you. You've got this, you're doing it, and we need you. We need you. And that I think is so important, and that's how we're going to transform the health and wellness and quality of life of our communities and our state, is as we diversify our workflow and our workforce. So
I just love that. We need you.
Yeah.
Because like kind of like we can be tense, thinking like, oh, I got this. But like we need you means like, oh, they need me, like the who I am.
It's like, okay, I got this. That's a reinforcement. Yeah. That's
I think it's like the internal,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes we need that internal motivation to push through the challenges, but then like, why are you doing it? You're not doing it for you.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like we
Yeah.
all are pursuing healthcare because we care about other people. We want to see people's lives better and transformed. And so it's the inward, like you've got this, and then the outward of you're doing it for others too. And I think sometimes in the hardest moments, right? Like when we can't find that strength in ourselves, it's so lovely to look outward and be reminded like, oh, yeah, I'm doing it for me, but I'm really doing it because I want to do it for the community.
Yeah. What would you say to yourself if you were like little? Like going back 20 years, what would you say to yourself?
Those heart moments, like what would you say? It's like one of those movies that you can tell your little Dr. R like.
That one's harder. What would I say? I think I would say enjoy the journey.
Okay.
Because I think sometimes we get so focused on our destination.
Yes.
It's so far away when you're young. And I so many of the high school students that I work with, sometimes they can't quite imagine medical school because it feels so far away. Okay, so don't think that far. Just think about the next step. Think about community college and then you just take it one step at a time. So but I think enjoying the journey along the way is important because there's so much joy, and there's so much to experience along the way that being present for that I think can really help when you talk about the resilience that you need to face your challenges. I think being present and enjoying the journey is a huge part of that. Because when your eye is only on that distant prize, then I think there is that risk that you can forget in the moment, like, wait, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this? This is torture. But when you look for those moments of joy, and can enjoy every step along the way, maybe not every step, most steps along the way, then I think when you arrive intact, and that also can protect you on the flip side, because burnout is real too.
Hence physics, going back to that.
Yeah. Enjoy the physics.
enjoy the part where you're done with it, because it's a quarter system, UCSD. You're done in 3 months, just 10 weeks. Right.
Oh my God.
All right.
I guess like since we talked about 20 years before, maybe we talk about 20 years future. What's your, as you say, you're talking about distance of the bar. What's your probably your goal, or like what you want to achieve, if it be too big of a statement?
No, I think it's an interesting time for you to ask me that question, because I think that my goals for my future self are different today than they were even a couple years ago. And I think that the rise in talking about diversity and anti-racism. And I think it's just opened a lot more opportunities and doors. And that's definitely a direction that I see my career going in. Those are things that, as we talked about already, right? So many positive changes, but we still have a long ways to go.
Yeah.
And I think that up until recently, that didn't feel like a career thing. Like it felt like something you did on the side.
Yeah.
And now I feel like there's so many opportunities to actually build that into my career. And I see it, it's like this thread that kind of runs through everything, because I see it in the work that I'm doing at the free clinic, and I see it in the work I'm doing with my high school students and working with residents, but also opportunities to literally promote diversity and inclusion and equity at our medical school. So it's definitely the direction that I see my career going. It's interesting because I love patient care, and I can't imagine ever giving it up completely. But I think being a leader in medical education is also something that I would never have known at the beginning in medical school. If you'd asked me, I'm like, no, I did this to take care of patients. But there's so much value in training medical students and residents. And so I'm kind of excited because I don't quite know I don't have like a super duper end goal, but excited that there are all these new opportunities to promote diversity and that I get to do that and be a doctor at the same time.
That's what makes the journey like really interesting, because like you may plan so much ahead, but like every step it's going to be different. Like you'll be, pivoting, but it's because you like it. It's not because like, you're not going there because like you're achieving your dream, but we'll be like, your own cheerleaders, supporting for social justice, like, go Dr. Rodriguez.
I'm so excited for you. Yeah. It's kind of like the unknown known, like the nuance. And then, you're jumping in, which is so, it's awesome.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of, I don't want to speak about it negatively, but sometimes it can feel like the minority tax, right? Where you're being asked to do things because you're a person of color or from a particular background. But it's also a huge privilege and honor to get to be in this place in my career where I can, like you're in the room where big conversations happen. And so that's kind of exciting for sure. So I see the ways that it can feel like a big ask, but also I think there's huge privilege. And to get to do it at the institution where I trained, knowing our history of where we come from and where we are at in our journey, and knowing where I would like to see us go is also really super exciting, because like this whole be the change can sometimes feel very cliche, but I can tell you that it's awesome to get to be a part of change, because when I was a medical student, it felt like moving a glacier. The needle was not going to move. And so to get to be at this place and see it not just budging, but moving, and with so much momentum, and alongside amazing and inspiring medical students is super awesome.
And I think honestly, it's very important that you are taking on that role, because, when you moved to public school, you had this culture shock because it was just the white students and then Asians, but then you coming from this other school that had kids from Compton or Inglewood, maybe these now that, the school is diversifying, these kids will now also be there, and they'll also have this culture shock, and you'll be able to help them and guide them as well. So I think that would also help as well.
Yes, we need you.
Tying that all in together.
I'm so excited for you. But
I'm excited for you because it's just exciting to know that this generation of students who are going to go through medical education are going to have this very deeper, richer understanding of what it means to take care of people individually and as communities, and that you're just going to be way better doctors. And that your experience in medical school will be a richer, more positive experience as well.
So going back at you with, they need you, Dr. Rodriguez.
Yes.
Let's see. Did you want to ask the other one?
I think we are.
What do you do for fun? Hobbies.
I know you're busy with free clinic at night. It ends at 12. I'm like, oh my God. He's there every week.
Or what's your go-to to de-stress? Is it just going on walk or traveling?
Traveling is the thing that I love to do the most, which has made this year really interesting because it's not been an option. But I love cooking, baking and hosting. So I'm really excited as we get through all of this past year with COVID and are able to gather again outside, vaccinated. I miss having people over and cooking and baking and just being with people. So I'm looking forward to that this summer.
The pizza party.
She
has a pizza oven at her house.
I have an outdoor pizza oven. I'm so ready to have people over. Backyard. I have 2 dogs and they're great. And so take them for walks, go to the beach. I feel like we live in an amazing city with so many beautiful places. And so I love exploring different parts of San Diego. And for me, living here, I love to be places where people are enjoying our city. And so I love going to Torrey Pines. People are always so happy to be there.
Oh yeah.
Balboa Park and Little Italy. And so that's what I like to do for fun. And I love being out on the water. So kayaking.
Like Lauea Cove or
even in the bay, anywhere. So I'm hoping to get to Catalina Island this summer and kayak there. I've never done it.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. So, a little bit about
this
me.
summer. It will be that time.
Yes.
Do you want a paddleboard next to her?
Oh yeah, I'll paddleboard. You have a stand-up paddleboard.
Terrible paddleboarder. Terrible. Pretty sure one of my legs is longer than the other, and so it's hard for me to
It's hard. Just keep going same direction.
It's hard. And then I'm also scared of water. So at the beginning, I had a hard time. I was like, I bought my life jacket.
It's not cool though. If you're the one wearing
I
it.
know. So but slowly but surely.
Yeah, me too. I'm not great at it, but I have definitely gone out with my friends, and everyone's like, "Oh, are you gonna take your dog?" I'm like, please, I can barely keep myself on board.
I've actually seen people with the life jackets, the dogs have the life jackets, they're there. I'm like, oh. Yeah, it's fun though.
Definitely.
I guess it was a great discussion talking about you with all these different things about your life story, words of encouragement to the future physicians, Latina physicians. Is there any words you want to add or any comments to our listeners?
Well, I guess I'll say this, regardless of whether you are going into medicine or are in medicine, we need you, whatever it is that you bring to our community and our world. So keep doing what you're doing. Find your cheerleaders that are going to encourage you along the way. And yeah, thank you for listening and being a part of this amazing community.
Hearing Her Voice is brought to you by Women's March San Diego at UCSD. The podcast is written and produced by Scarlett Lopez and Jinho Jung. Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez, for taking your time to chat with us today. Our design director is Melisa Wang. Our creative director is Zuri Inzunza, and our technical director is Katherine Cordova. To learn more about Women's March San Diego at UCSD, please visit our website on Linktree. Subscribe to Hearing Her Voice on Anchor app or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you.